Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Are we witnessing a backlash against the Marxist Democrat Party agenda? Are parents and taxpaying citizens finally woke to the subversive agenda to destroy America and all of the values our nation was founded upon? On this week's podcast, I have invited CRT expert Robert Taft back to our program to discuss this historic period in our nation's history. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that shines the light of biblical truth on vital issues from today's headlines that impact every American, Jew and Christian, people of faith and people of conscience. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org. I also want to remind you to listen and share this and all of our previous podcasts with your family and friends so that they can become more informed about this and other related issues. Our goal at PJTN is to equip you to stand against the disinformation by taking back local control of your community and your children's and grandchildren's education. The first step to that process is education. We must become informed. Remember to visit our website daily to receive updates on all of PJTN's groundbreaking initiatives and programs, and sign up to receive PJTN's media and action alerts to share with family and friends. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms at PJTN. As a PJTN Watchman, your action could mean all the difference in the success of our global mission to combat the enemy that is trying to rob our children of their future. So please help me spread this vital information today. We are commanded to teach our children the Word of God, as is stated in Joel chapter 1, verse 3. Tell your children about it. Let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. That's 3 generations of children who are to be taught about God's covenant with Israel and their exodus from Egypt. Unfortunately, we have failed miserably, and we are witnessing the evidence of that in our classrooms today. So what can we do to take back local control of our community? What are some actions that must be taken to reverse the course we are currently on? We are witnessing parents and citizens nationwide who are mobilizing against the propaganda and history revisionism being peddled to our children. And now we are even witnessing anti-Semitism and Holocaust revisionism in their curriculum. Organizations and institutions that were once considered respected and trusted have bought into the anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian narrative and can no longer be trusted. More and more teaching organizations like the National Education Association, as well as teachers' unions and the National School Board Association, have bought into this propaganda and are actively pushing this effort that will ultimately destroy our republic unless we engage. On a previous podcast, we discussed the National School Board Association's letter to the Biden administration requesting that they designate parents and citizens who attend school board meetings to hold their school board members accountable as domestic terrorists. In response, Attorney General Merrick Garland essentially issued a declaration of war in a memo to weaponize the FBI, including the criminal division of U.S. attorneys in 14,000 school districts across the U.S., addressing threats against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff, stating that in November, the department will announce a series of measures designed to address the rise of supposed criminal conduct directed towards school personnel. Who is the target of this investigation? Parents and grandparents, moms and dads. It's not Antifa who murdered people in the streets, destroyed public and private property, nor is it Black Lives Matter who launched a modern-day pogrom in Los Angeles. No, it's law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. Are we now the target of our Attorney General? Last week, American citizens showed up en masse on Election Day to send a message to the Biden administration, the Attorney General, and their collaborators across the U.S. that parents and tax-paying citizens drew a line in the sand, refusing the Marxist takeover of our children's education and our communities. It was a nationwide referendum that reverberated from Virginia to Washington state, and many points in between. Americans rejected the indoctrination of our children with racist, anti-Semitic, anti-Judeo-Christian critical race theory propaganda in our children's classrooms. And we sent a message to Biden and A.G. Garland that we will not be intimidated into silence. On this week's podcast, I have invited Robert Taft back to Proclaiming Justice. Mr. Taft is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce for International Operations and President and CEO of the World Trade Centers Association of Florida. He has served as a consultant to the U.S. Defense Department, American corporations, and foreign governments. Robert, welcome back to Proclaiming Justice.
Thank you, Laurie. It's nice to be with you again.
Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this revolutionary moment in U.S. history. You know, years ago, it was a decade ago, when we first found a textbook that had an anti-Semitic quote. And upon further research, not only found that the textbook was anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, but anti-American and anti-Judeo-Christian as well. We were sounding the alarm to parents and citizens all over the country, telling them, you have got to read your children's textbooks. You've got to go to school board meetings. You've got to listen to what they're doing, what they're teaching your children. And Robert, very few times would I get people in these group settings, would I get more than one, maybe two people in the whole group that would actually get engaged. I would have parents who would come to me and say, oh, that's terrible that that's happening there, but we've got a great school system and we have the best teachers, or our teachers are Christians. They wouldn't teach that. I wanted to just, my head explode, because I knew this was going on. It was going on across the country, but people lulled themselves to sleep. So, of course, now, following COVID, now we all see what our children are being taught and how they're being used as propaganda guinea pigs. What do you think is taking place in America today? Do you think this is a one-off, or do you think people have had enough and are using their vote to push back at our elected officials?
I think that they are. The question is how pervasive is it yet? We keep hearing about Loudoun County, and we in this past election, not only was Virginia very successful, but I think across the country you saw school boards being upturned and new Republicans moving into those areas, and that's what needs to happen. We need to unseat the school boards, and we need to unseat these teacher unions. Now, the teacher unions are incredibly locked in. They've been donating to the Democrat Party for forever. They're unionized to the hilt. They get an incredible amount of support from the current administration. And so they're locked in, and this is what they want to do. This is the agenda that they want. They want critical race theory. They want transgenderism. They want all of these things in the school. And the purpose of it is to divide the society and to really rip apart the nuclear family. This Democrat Party is is Marxist. They can't even call themselves Democrats anymore. And what really riles me up is when you hear a Nancy Pelosi or a Chuck Schumer or one of these people talking about how the Republicans are downgrading our democracy by not voting for these socialist plans. That's anything but the truth. And it really insults me, and it should insult you and all of your listeners, that people in Washington actually think that we buy that narrative, that we think that by not pushing their socialism, Marxism programs, that we are somehow hurting democracy. Well, that's absolutely false,
Absolutely.
and we should be telling everybody about that.
Mm-hmm.
But this this plan for critical race theory, um, and transgenderism and all of it, it's dividing people, but it's doing a lot more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming from the globalist movement. This is coming from progressives, and both of those groups have combined educationally since the early 1900s. But their whole purpose is to divide us into a two-tier system.
Mm-hmm.
It's the elites versus the masses. And what they've been doing since the early 1900s is that they have been dumbing down Americans through public education.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see. We have become complacent. We've allowed them to do this to us. And suddenly, again, because of COVID, as you said, Laurie, we're waking up to the fact that, oh my goodness, look what they're doing to our kids. The fact of the matter is they did it to most of us.
Exactly. It's
and
so true.
and so we've kind of taken it in stride, but it's reached a point now where it's something much grander and much larger, than we had thought.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just explain a little bit about what they're doing to the kids, because I think that's very important to see this in a larger picture. The first thing they're trying to do is you're trying to get the kids to be almost addicted, if you will, to the internet, to online teaching, to robotic um, interrelationships.
Mm-hmm.
They want the kids particularly to become more dependent on technology and the technology around them. Um, the second thing that they're trying to do is to divide us, as I said before. They want white people to feel guilty about their past sins, which is totally bogus. And they
Mm-hmm.
want black people to feel sorry for themselves, to feel entitled. And of course, we see a lot of that through Black Lives Matter and the like.
Right.
You've got attorney generals now that release criminals. You've got petty theft taking place all over California, and nobody seems to blink an eye about it. Again, it's damaging both the white community and the black community, and it's reducing us to the lowest common denominator, which is exactly what the elite wants. It wants to have a passive, dummied down group of people out there.
Yeah.
The third thing that they're doing is they're dividing the nuclear family. As you see in this whole uh, upbringing or uprising, I should say, on CRT, you've got the government saying that the parents are the bad people. They're criminals, they're white supremacists, and all of this. And in school, they're trying to teach the kids that this is a bad thing and that their parents are bad people. And don't listen to the parents, listen to the school, and you'll learn the truth. And again, what's that is doing? It's dividing the moral-based parents from
Mm-hmm.
these uh, indoctrinated students. And so this combination of things that are going on is really, to me, it's child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
I think that what they're doing is they're taking advantage of these kids. They have a definite goal in mind to retrain them into some kind of collective society. And the globalists down the road believe that ultimately we are going to be linked to technology, and the technology is actually going to, through artificial intelligence, make us smarter, do better things, and actually change what the Homo sapien really is, by planting chips in our brains and all these other kinds of things. They want to make us a better human race, if you will.
Right.
All of this is nonsense. All of this is craziness. And yet, this is what the United Nations is talking about. This is what the World Forum is talking about. It's the rich people of the world. They want to degrowth the population and take what's left of the population and turn it into some kind of technology dependent Unix, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what their total goal is.
Yeah.
But this is the long-term, long-range view of things, and it seems rather incredible and spectacular, but it's real. I mean, this is not science fiction or something that's going to happen 200 years from now. This is something that is actively going on right now, and the kids are right in the center of that. And if the parents don't keep beating on these school boards and beating on these teachers' unions, it's going to get away from us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You talk about child abuse and what we're doing to our children. It reminds me, Robert, back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a big push for psychology and psychologists and, studying sociology. And I remember thinking, at that time, it was really odd to me because it was kind of a new concept that I had never heard of in my family. Of course, I was a teenager back in the 70s, and I always thought how odd this is. But I wonder, looking back, because, everything is hindsight. We look back from where we are, where we stand today, and look at some of the progressive directions that we were going in, not really paying attention to all of these signs like abortion and the whole pro-life movement, the destruction of the nuclear family, like what you talked about, moving into this whole transhumanism that we're facing today. And, you talked about this being, back at the back in the early 1900s, 100 years ago. This agenda has been planned for a long time. And I was reading about John Dewey, who wanted to change, wanted to move in this direction, but he would warn his colleagues who wanted to push and progress things faster not to move too fast because the American people will figure out what you're doing and they'll stop us. And so it's been a gradual usurpation of our values, the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. And I agree, it is child abuse. When you have children, 6-year-old kids coming home, asking their mother or father, their parents, are they racist? Am I a racist, Mom, because I'm white? Am I bad? Am I evil because I'm white? This is absolutely outrageous. And we saw all the experiments that Hitler conducted on people, on children, innocent individuals. And we look at what we're doing. We're looking at the experimentation on America, on the world, really, because this is not just happening in the United States. I want to remind our audience that every Western country is dealing with this issue. Every Western country, they all happen to be, just I'm going to note, the daughter nations of Great Britain. And you look at what's happening down in Australia and in New Zealand and South Africa and even Great Britain and here in the U.S. and Canada, and we see this same struggle. But, is if the battle we are facing, Robert, in classrooms across this nation for the minds of our children wasn't bad enough, now our children are dealing with the onslaught of the critical race theory. Like I talked about this 6-year-old girl who came home asking her mom if she was evil because she was white. You know, we look at what the 1619 Project, and even the authors of the 1619 Project said that their history or their facts were not historically accurate. And they tried to get away with that. And of course, that's kind of gone dormant. But you also look at the anti Semitic and anti American, the anti Judeo Christian Black Lives Matter curriculum that was being pushed through our schools. Now we're seeing the polls are beginning to confirm that we must re-educate the Americans, because even Americans have lost touch with our history. They've forgotten. You know, and I like to remind our audience that they should go back to Hillsdale College. They have a great Constitution 101 program to sign up and take that course, you know, every year as a refresher, and send it to your family and friends to remind them as well to take it. But we've lost sight of the Judeo-Christian history that our nation was founded upon, and the role and the responsibility as a Judeo-Christian nation that God expects of us, and that's to live our faith before the world. But we have allowed people to distort our history, and we have believed the lie. You know, there was a great quote that I read earlier, Robert. I want to share it with you. And it was, quote, "History is not there for you to like or dislike. It is there for you to learn from, and if it offends you, even better, because you are less likely to repeat it. History is not yours to change or destroy." How true is that statement today?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to talk about critical race theory. So we are going to move along on this program because people are still not sure what CRT is. What is the easiest way that you would define critical race theory, Robert?
Well, critical race theory goes back to actually the time of Herbert Marcuse, and Herbert Marcuse was born and raised in Germany and came out of their very, very toxic Marxist institution.
Mm-hmm.
And he came over to the United States in the 1930s, and he basically was appalled that Americans got along so well and did so well, even though they were in the middle of a depression. And he was bound and determined to change that. And he came up with critical theory, and the critical theory basically was supposed to be lodged in laws and the whole legal system, and basically tear down the precepts of the Constitution. The whole goal of this was to eliminate the idea of we the people and government by the people, and to make it more of a dictatorial power over the people type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what happened was critical theory was esoteric back then, whatever. But it came to Harvard, as these things normally do, and it was reorganized as critical race theory.
Mm.
And the whole idea there was, again, in the spirit of Saul Alinsky, was to divide and conquer the American people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Barack Obama learned in Harvard was this critical race theory. And of course, we all know that he was very much based in racism. His whole administration was about racism. Rather than bringing us all together, he tore us apart.
Yep.
And so critical race theory was a perfect instrument for him to use. Had Hillary Clinton been the president, instead of Donald Trump,
Mm-hmm.
We would have had critical race theory all over the country 4 years ago. The purpose of critical race theory is this division. it tries to make white people look like they're bad and awful and everything else. But it's just as bad for African Americans, because it basically tells them that they will always be discriminated against. They don't have a chance. They don't have a chance of real success, which we all know is crazy.
That's right.
Just not right. But what it does is it's the same kind of mentality that the inner cities do with the Black neighborhoods. They tell these people there's very little hope. They don't have a lot to look forward to. And as a result, the youth turns to crime. They do these ugly things. 13% of the population is Black. 53% of all crime in the United States is done by Black people. And so consequently, you get this indoctrination, which just doesn't come from the classroom, but it comes from these city leaders in Chicago and Baltimore and New York that basically denigrate the Black race. And it basically says you have no hope. Well, CRT locks that in. It basically says you don't have any hope. You're always going to be like this, and it's inescapable.
I mean,
And they say the same things to whites. They say you are always going to be racist, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Well, if that's the case, what are we even talking about here? Why even discuss something that is impossible to escape? And then they even go a step further, and they say, well, if you claim that you are not a racist, then you're really lying to yourself. And so you're the worst kind of racist. So rather than improving, you're throwing yourself back.
You're a racist. It's interesting.
So this is just kind of like a weight placed upon all races. And I have, I think I sent you 9 of them, but I have a list of 17 questions. And I've done a bunch of research on critical race theory. I've written papers about it and the like. But I boiled down a lot of this into 17 questions, which I believe every school board, every teacher union head, and teachers need to answer these questions and explain why that material is not in what they're teaching. And I would appreciate it very much, Laurie, if I could send you the complete list and you could somehow get it out to your viewers and put it on your website or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
17 questions. Everybody can read them in 5 minutes. And really, if you're going to your school boards or you're up against your teacher unions, you should ask them these questions. And it puts them in a corner. I've already done it. It puts them in a corner. They button up. They won't respond to it. Instead, what they do is they run with their tail between their legs to the to the government and have the government and the FBI come down on top of it. I mean, it's so ludicrous.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is missing in the approach that we're taking with the school boards, particularly, is that if you observe these sessions, it's all run by the school boards. It's school board turf. They give 2 or 3 minutes to a speaker. And not once do any of these school board people have to respond.
Yeah.
And
You're right.
And my point is this, and you'll see from the questions that I raise why this would be important. If you were able to get school board members to participate in open public dialogue, in debate sessions, that's when they would be forced to answer these questions. And if they couldn't answer they can't answer these questions with critical race theory. It's impossible. And so my point is that if they're confronted with these, they need to talk. People need to see what these people are about. Instead, they sit up on those dioceses and they act with all this arrogance,
Yeah.
and they listen to these people complain with very, very good arguments, and then they just dismiss them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just teach whatever they want to teach. And I mean, I don't know if you heard the open mic thing last week, but one of the school board members was telling one of the parents to f themselves.
I heard that. I couldn't believe that a school board member would have the audacity to say such a thing.
That particular comment was so telling.
That's true.
This is what these school boards think about,
Yeah.
parents. And so, even in Loudoun County, where they're beating on the drum and they're so well organized and they're doing all these good things, they still haven't been able to bring these people into public debates, because these people would be shattered. And if they refuse to debate, this should be presented all over the county. Everybody should know, well, these school board people are afraid to come and actually defend their positions.
Yep, you're exactly right. That's what needs to happen. There needs to be town hall meetings between now and your school board meeting, or your election day. Every school board member, and it's very easy to put together a town hall meeting, and we would be happy to help you do that at PJTN. So if you're interested, all of these great points that Robert is making, it's critically important that we, the people, moms and dads, parents and grandparents, tax-paying citizens, take the upper hand. I wanted to go back to something that you said about this racism that is where we're pushing CRT. We're constantly, some of the buzzwords that we see around critical race theory is equity. And basically, it's the notion that Black children or colored children are not getting the same opportunities as white children. And when the colored children or children of color don't succeed or aren't testing as well or reading as well as their white counterpart in the classroom, then the goal is to hold everybody back. We're seeing this now coming out with math, the inequity in math, that if the colored children in the class aren't coming to the correct answer, then it's better to hold the whole class back than allow the children who progress or are doing better in the class to succeed and to move forward. But unfortunately, it's the blame that the colored children don't succeed is based on the white children, on this white supremacy. And this is a huge problem. But something I wanted to just mention, Robert, we are a nation of Judeo-Christian values. This organization, PJTN, is a Christian Jewish organization. And when I think about the Black community and how Black children have been convinced that they cannot achieve, we're talking about a community that is strong in their faith. And it boggles my mind that parents and even children would allow a teacher or an education system to convince them that they're never going to get ahead. They're never going to succeed. They will never get to go to college because the system favors white children more than it does Black children or colored children. And if you think about it, these children come from families of faith. Where is the faith factor? Where is their hope in Almighty God and trusting that He created each one of us in His image, and we have a destiny that belongs only to us as individuals? I don't understand how this demographic, this group, could allow themselves to be sucked into this. And for that matter, even white members of the white community, they too have bought into this. In fact, we have, many of the people who are pushing like the Black Lives Matter movement and 1619 happen to be from the white community. I don't understand this this thinking, this lack of faith within these people groups.
Let me
So,
let me respond to two things that you just said. Let's go back to what you were saying initially about how they're not given any hope or whatever. This is something that the the Al Sharptons of the world have just made a fortune over. As long as they can keep the black person down and blame it on the whites, Al Sharpton stuffs his pockets with money and can go on these little speaking tours and rile up the troops and all of this. It's how you monetize for political reasons something like racism.
yeah.
But here are the couple of facts that, if thrown out on the table, again, people can't respond to. Fact one, 13% of the population is black. 13% of the population, or 13% of that black population, goes to college. The blacks and the whites in Harvard and Vanderbilt and other top schools do comparably the same, graduation-wise. There are 21, fact three, there are 21 universities that are both black and white in school population, 21 where black students outperform white students. So to say that that black people are inferior mentally is totally wrong. It's from people who don't look at these statistics.
It's
It's all
disingenuous.
about parenting. It's all about working with the schools and what have you. Take Baltimore, for instance. Baltimore is the second highest per student city in the country. Baltimore. It pays $22,000 a year per student, black, white, indifferent, or whatever. Okay. They have 13 public high schools in Baltimore. None of the students in these schools, none of these black students, have maintained high school standards. Why is that? Is it the teaching? Is it the students? Is it the lack of money? No,
Right.
none. I mean, what is it? Are these teachers that bad? Are the students that unruly? I mean, what is going on? It is not a matter of brain power. It is something else that is keeping these people behind. Now, it could be corruption in the political structure of the city, and that this 20,000 per student is not getting to the right places. It could be that the crime in Baltimore is so bad that these kids again feel hopeless and don't even try. There's a big thing in the black community that says that if you try to excel academically, you are being white. You're acting like a white person. And you see so many of these successful conservatives being called Uncle Toms and all of that. And it's coming from a large part of the black community that has just been duped over the years by the Democrats. And for the past 50 years, 87% of the top 100 cities in the United States have been run by Democrats, and half of those people have been black themselves. Why are these cities failing? Why are they so messed up if the principal purpose for the Democrats is to improve the state of the African Americans?
Yeah, and they never improve, and they keep them suppressed and oppressed. And I remember watching years ago a video of a gentleman. I think his last name was Thaley. He went into the inner city kids back in the 60s, inner city schools. He took children from that inner city, and these were children who came from, broken homes, troubled homes, and he taught these children how to read, how to write, how to add, how to subtract. These kids did not fit the model of what we are witnessing today. These kids were taught the basics. They were given a good education despite the environment that they were growing up in, that they lived in, within their home, in their neighborhoods, in their community. These kids were successful. And this gentleman who went through and started to teach them used a classical approach to education, which we should all be going back to. That's what we need to demand, is that we get rid of this garbage and we go back to classical education. That's how our children are going to excel. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, yellow, brown. It doesn't matter. It's going back to the foundation. And unfortunately, we're not doing that. But, the opposition is coming out, Robert, and they're saying, and they're, of course, it's full force saying CRT is not being taught in our classrooms. And in fact, there was a school curriculum developer, a whistleblower, who came out last week and blew the whistle on Indiana schools, stating that when educators tell you they are not teaching CRT, they're lying. Wow, that's explosive. And this is someone who's in the school system. Is CRT really being taught in America's classrooms? And how can parents recognize it? What should they be looking for? What buzzwords?
It's being taught almost everywhere. It's being taught here in North Carolina. It's being taught, I would gather, even in Florida. It's becoming, they're very crafty in these teacher unions and whatever, and they're trying to bury this as much as possible so that the students won't go home and ask mommy or daddy why white people are bad. It's a
Just
very
like Common
subtle
Core,
kind of
I might
thing,
add.
but it does exist. And that gentleman is absolutely correct. If the school board says no, they're lying. I mean, look at this recent election in Virginia. You had Terry McAuliffe got up there and basically said parents shouldn't be involved in this, and then it became a real heated issue. And then he doubled down on it and said, absolutely, we don't teach this in the schools. And Cruz Rufo and a couple of other people came out and said, well, it's right on your website that you teach this stuff. I mean, that's how arrogant these people are, that they think if they state something on Meet the Press on Sunday afternoon, that everybody's going to buy what they say, and the problem will go away. Well, it won't. But when you have somebody like a Terry McAuliffe who's running for governor of the state coming out and blatantly saying, this is a lie, we just don't teach this in the schools. If he can say it, anybody can say it.
That's right.
And they do. I mean, I can't remember the last time a Democrat told the truth about anything.
Yeah, this
I'm really having a hard time with that.
I know. I hear you. He had stated, this whistleblower stated, that you're not going to find CRT or critical race theory in the standards, but it's the concept of white racism. It's words like equity. It's white racism, white supremacy. Those are words. But it's he was saying that it's the concept of white racism as they teach all academic disciplines, including math, science, history, English, and the arts. And in fact, I I think you know, Robert, I serve on the Tennessee Textbook and Quality Commission. And since my appointment, I have been inundated in Tennessee with examples of critical race theory in curriculum in grades 2 through 12. Now, I haven't studied kindergarten yet or the first grades to see, but I'll bet you I can find the concepts, these buzzwords in some of the information. In fact, I was recently made aware of the education commissioner in Tennessee, Commissioner Schwinn, recently hired a former deputy superintendent of California schools in Tennessee, who she hired here for Tennessee, who is promoting critical race theory, just as our commission is preparing for review of math textbooks and instructional materials. In fact, I'd like to read just some of the summary of this curriculum, and I'm sure you're probably quite familiar with it, but our audience needs to hear this about what this new pathway to equitable math instruction, dismantling racism in mathematics instructions. Listen to this, Robert, and I'd love to get your comment. It says this tool provides an opportunity to examine their actions, beliefs, and values around teaching mathematics. The framework for deconstructing racism in mathematics offers essential characteristics of anti-racist math educators and critical approaches to dismantling white supremacy in math classrooms by visibilizing the toxic characteristics of white supremacy culture. With respect to math, building on the framework, teachers engage with critical praxis in order to shift their instructional beliefs and practices towards anti-racist math education. By centering anti-racism, we model how to be anti-racist math educators with accountability. Are you kidding me? This is what it says in this instruction, this curriculum for teachers that is floating across the country, where everything is about white supremacy, and their goal is to dismantle it. And they're asking, and part of as I was reviewing some of the materials and exercises, they're basically asking themselves, the teachers, you have to ask yourself, what you think about racism. I am just like, are you kidding me? But this is this whole critical race theory is infiltrating every aspect of our children's education. And Robert, unless we confront it, unless we go after this and look for it and then call out our school board members, because remember, your school board, ladies and gentlemen, they're the ones who get to vote and approve the curriculum that is used in your schools, in your district. So it's critically important that you be informed about all of this. Your thoughts, Robert?
Well, all of this math and science and whatever does have a basic root in something. Have you heard of postmodernism?
Oh, yes.
Postmodernism is a concept, again, that was created in our very, very liberal colleges, which is basically relativism. And basically, we saw it big time in Hannah Jones's the New York Times 1619 Project.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In that particular book, there was no need for truth, as you had mentioned earlier. There were no footnotes, not even credibility in most cases.
Right.
But here's what the editor of the New York Times said about this when he was confronted by real historians. He said, historical understanding is not fixed. It changes with new voices of scholarship. Well, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like saying that I'm a scholar and I'm saying that there was never a Thomas Jefferson and he never came up with the Bill of Rights. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is. But equally ridiculous is this. Academics are now trying to apply postmodernism to science and math. Mm-hmm. They believe that science is a white creation, biased in favor of
Mm-hmm.
white privilege and excludes the reasoning of minority groups. Thus,
Mm.
minority views must be included. So consequently, what you end up having in math, for instance, is that 2 plus 2 equals 4. We know that, it's a fact. We can show that empirically and whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
if a Black person thinks that the answer is 5 or 3, we should be accepting of that, because math, they're trying to say, is now becoming relative instead of absolute.
Mm.
And,
Right.
and so this is how they get this racism, equality, or equity into math and science. And they do the same thing with science. I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
taking things that are absolute in science and trying to make them relative, and it's
Right.
ridiculous. And this whole concept of equity um, is larger than you'll notice. They don't use the word equality, they use
Exactly.
equity, and equity is about redistribution of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a concept that basically says that in order for in order for us to be fair to all of these people,
Mm-hmm.
we have to divide things more equally, more equitably,
Right.
and consequently, by calling it equity instead of equality, you get into a whole thing of of wealth
Mm-hmm.
and possessions, and how that should be divided up.
Right. Right. Some of the other Robert issues that I have found in my research is, of course, with CRT, that all of societal's problems, we hear the narrative that all of societal's problems are due to white men, and Western civilization was built on racism. We've also heard that capitalism is a tool of white supremacy. So, all the values that our nation was founded upon, of course, are now racist. They are not equitable, and we have to change that. In fact, also have the critical race theory proponents blame lower reading scores on the inequity, and that's how they legitimize taking from the white students in order to give students of color a chance to excel. Martin Luther King Jr. should be rolling in his grave. That's all I can say by what is going on in this country, because this was not what he envisioned for this country.
But
And
you'll notice in what you just said, um, they're basically putting the Black as the standard, and it's a
mm,
low standard, it's a low bar. And what they're doing is, rather than rising up the Black person, they're
mhm,
dragging down the white
yes.
person, so that it is what I consider the lowest common denominator.
Hmm.
You're basically doing an injustice to both Black people and white people. And this is exactly what the elites want. They want to
Hmm.
dummy down the masses and make them ultimately commit to Marxism and become a collective society. And then, of course, the globalists will come in with their technology and link us up and do all kinds of nasty
Yeah.
things to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is becoming, the whole issue with CRT has become so political. It's dividing parents from their children. You talked about this earlier, that it's separating the family. We used to see it with our children in college, where our kids would come home from the university and we'd say, "Where is my kid? Where is the kid I dropped off in his freshman year? Because I want him back." And, but now it's happening even in these lower grades, where we see our children in secondary schools are also subject to this mindset, that they're actually believing it. They're questioning. We had one kid who questioned his faith. And now we've got a little girl who's, asks her mom, "Am I an evil person?" I mean, this is having an impact. It is, as you said earlier in the program, this is child abuse. These people should be charged for the abuse. On top of, and of course, we don't have time to get into this on the program, but we see pornography the demoralization of our society. Pornography is coming into our schools, our elementary school libraries, and parents have no idea that this is going on, and kids are checking out these books. And I mean, it's disgusting what has happened, but it's dividing our country. It's dividing parents from their children. It's dividing parents from their children's teachers and the administrators in the school. It's dividing parents from their school board members. You know, Robert, what do you think is the solution to this problem? How do we overcome this situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think I think what was happening in Virginia is a good indication of what needs to happen. Um, the reason that the Republicans won that state this time around was not just because of the parents' action at the school boards, although that was critical. It was a very, very important part of this whole thing. And the parents stood up. They said, we don't care about the FBI or Merrick Garland or any of these people. We're going to speak out. And the more the noose tightened around their neck, the more outspoken they became. Mm-hmm. That's critical to making this happen. But the other thing that's critical, and I want to make a comparison here. In the state of Virginia, the Republicans were prepared. They had 99% of their poll watchers out. They had their precinct captains out. They had lawyers up the wazoo to fight any kind of discrepancy or whatever, and they won. They had a good candidate who beat, quite frankly, a terrible candidate. He was a Clinton man. He was awful. But they brought him down in probably the safest and most honest election in a long time. Conversely, up in New Jersey, they should have done the same thing. In New Jersey, Murphy is a disaster as a governor, a disaster.
Right.
In so many ways. And the people of New Jersey know that. All night long, the opposition was winning, and by sometimes as much as 4 points. Mm-hmm. And at midnight, Bergen County, which is the big county up there and whatever, Bergen County had 100% total vote in. And I can't remember the guy's name or I'll mispronounce it, but he was leading in Bergen County. 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly 40,000 ballots appear in Bergen County, and Murphy is declared the winner up there. Yeah. The Republicans were caught flat-footed. They never expected the Republican to win. They didn't have the lawyers up there. They weren't prepared to counter any of this. Nobody was watching the balloting that was going on in Bergen County, and the result was the same thing that happened in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, in the 2020 election. This is something right now. The legislatures of the states have the responsibility for election law. Yeah. These governors are taking it away from them. Like they're nasty little children and can't be trusted with election law. Mm-hmm. And nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, if Trump hadn't complained as much as he did about the 2020 election, do you think we'd be going through all of these current audits and canvassing and whatever to find out what the real truth is? Yeah. Probably not, because most Republicans would have rolled over and played dead. But you have to have a political structure that is ready to take on these state governors, and you've got to have the local communities going after these school boards. This has got to be an all-in kind of state-by-state fight.
Absolutely.
And the federal government has just lost total control.
Absolutely.
I mean, their nonsense is just out of control. It's bringing this country down, and the only way we can fight it at the current time is on a state by state basis.
I agree. 100%. A decade ago, we started that, like I said earlier, when we started the program, we launched a campaign to expose a textbook that was being used that I knew after researching that book that if we didn't get rid of the curriculum, that our children were going to turn on our country. And I was beating the drum for a decade, telling parents and citizens, whoever would hear me, that we have got to start looking at our children's textbooks. We have to attend school board meetings. We need to review the agenda for the school board meetings. See what these school board members are planning for the future of your children. Remember, our children represent the future of our country, of this republic. And if we just turn over the school system and we say the problem is too big, we can't defeat them, then we lose, and we lose this country. And you know what? Our kids are counting on us. Our grandchildren are counting on us to rise up and take on this battle. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. And, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said those words, and they were so true. They were true then, and they are true today. And Robert, you are absolutely spot on. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to pay attention. What are your children being taught? I would strongly urge every one of our audience to homeschool your children. For those of you who say you can't do it, I didn't think I could do it. But look, the whole country had to do it last year. We were all homeschooling our children. You don't have to use the garbage, the lies, the disinformation that they are peddling to our children in our classrooms. You can get solid, good curriculum to teach your children. And if you can't pull your children out of the public school, then you need to sit down and have a session with them every night at the dinner table or after dinner. Sit down and talk about what they learned. Show movies, historical movies. We've got plenty of them on our website at pjtn.org. Sit down and watch these films. Have a conversation with your kids instead of allowing your kids to get bought into the technology and having them, because as Robert said early on in the program, they are using technology to basically drown our children, to desensitize our children. We've got to teach our children to engage and to have these important conversations. You need to look for words like equity and white supremacy in your children's curriculum or in their textbooks, in any instructional materials they bring home. These are all important. And Robert, I look forward to receiving the documents. We will get those up on our Learn page of the pjtn.org website so that people can download those 17 questions. They can take them to school board meetings, because it's so important to ask those questions, to let your voice, let those words go out into the airwaves for everyone who's sitting in that room listening. Let those words drop on their desktops. And let those school board members squirm, because I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, they all have to go. They are all the problem. If you can find a school board member who is fighting against the odds with so much opposition, then you need to get behind that school board member. You need to support them. But ladies and gentlemen, the change is not going to happen. We saw what happened in Virginia. We saw what has happened across this country. We have the momentum behind us, but it all requires our action. We have to, as Robert said, we have to fight the battle county by county, state by state. Stop putting your focus in Washington, D.C. There's plenty of people handling D.C. We need to take back local control of our communities, of our school boards, our county commissions, our city aldermen, our mayors, and our state legislature, including our governor. We can win this battle. Look at what just happened. It was a referendum, and November 2022 is coming fast. It's coming soon. So we need to get involved. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the facts. Robert, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight and for taking the time to go through all of this with us, to explain what critical race theory is, what people need to be looking for, how they can take action. We so appreciate all the incredible work that you are doing. I look forward to having you back on the program very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the truth. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to warn our family and friends and neighbors about this existential threat to our communities. How will God judge us for standing by as the world, even Christian leaders, accept this disinformation and indoctrination of our children in our local classrooms against these historic truths? We cannot remain silent. And I want to remind you, the prophet Ezekiel reminded us, God told the prophet, that if we see the enemy advancing and we fail to warn the inhabitants of the city, if any innocent blood is shed, it's going to be required of us. You have just heard the facts. You now are a watchman. You now know where the enemy is advancing. You now have the responsibility biblically to warn your neighbors, to warn your community about what is happening in your community and how you can take it back, how you can mobilize your community. You have to sound the alarm. In closing, don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue this conversation about taking back local control of our community and our children's education. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, you can help support this effort for just $20 a month. PJTN is on the front lines and in the headlines, but we can't do it without your faithful prayers and your financial support. I hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting our mission as we educate to activate Jews, Christians, and all people of conscience to stand on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. I want to remind you and leave you with just a word of encouragement from the scriptures. And my scripture today is from Psalm 144, verse 1, and it says, "Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle." So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our motto. He trains our hands for war and our fingers for battle. God bless you all, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the state of Israel, and these United States. And don't forget, send me just a little blurb. Tell me what you thought about what Robert had to say about critical race theory. I would love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.